Vice President Kamala Harris. She appeared today in front of the world, in front of the media, in front of the international community, and she had thoughts. She had thoughts on Columbus Day. As you know, today officially is still Columbus Day, right? People all over this country still call it Columbus Day. They still have Columbus Day sales, where we honor, as I did growing up, or at least the school I went to did, I did. Christopher Columbus discovering America. You know, in 1492, Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue. All of that. Well, Kamala Harris did something that U.S. presidents don't do. She stood up and spoke out against Columbus Day. Sort of. Check this out. It's an interesting response from somebody who normally plays it pretty safe. But listen to what Vice President Harris said.
But that is not the whole story. That it is an honor, of course, to be with you this week as we celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day, as we speak truth about our nation's history. Since 1934, every October, the United States has recognized the voyage of the European explorers who first landed on the shores of the Americas. But that is not the whole story. That has never
at all
been the whole story. Those explorers ushered in a wave of devastation for tribal nations, perpetrating violence, stealing land, and spreading disease. We must not shy away from this shameful past, and we must shed light on it and do everything we can to address the impact of the past on Native communities today. It is an honor, of course.
So Kamala Harris steps up and says, hey, we can't tell the story of Columbus without telling the whole story. The whole story here is a story of conquest. It's a story, as she said, it ushered in a wave of devastation for tribal nations, perpetrating violence, stealing land, and spreading disease. We must not shy away from this shameful past and shed light on it and do everything we can to address the impact of the past on Native communities today. Now, Donald Trump's campaign, of course, jumped on this because they want to make her into a crazy radical. A crazy radical. Imagine if Kamala Harris really were a crazy radical. How awesome would that be? But it's a low bar here, and she's certainly far ahead of Trump on this issue. But Trump said, or his campaign said, President Trump will make sure Christopher Columbus's great legacy is honored and protect this holiday from radical leftists who want to erase our nation's history like Kamala Harris. That's so fascinating that she's being framed and positioned as the person who is erasing history. No, she's the one who's actually trying to acknowledge and spotlight the history in this moment with this particular story. It's the conservatives, literally those who are trying to conserve and preserve these old narratives that are false, who are hiding the real history, who are erasing history. But here's the thing, right? Shout out to Kamala Harris for acknowledging that this is Indigenous Peoples Day, not Columbus Day. In doing so, you're acknowledging the deep, dark settler colonial history of European settlers to the United States. But I got two problems here. Problem number one, calling it Indigenous Peoples Day doesn't mean anything if you don't give Indigenous people their land back, right? What good is it? What good is it to say, yes, they brought devastation and disease and they took people's lands and blah, 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 blah. And then at the end of the day, those same Indigenous people don't have anything. Those same Indigenous people aren't given reparations. They're not given access to resources. They're literally not given the land that was taken from them. Eve Tuck and K. Wayne Yang wrote an article a long time ago, 2012, called "Decolonization is Not a Metaphor." And it was written to academics who had a tendency to talk about decolonizing their research methods and decolonizing their teaching. But decolonization is about giving land back. And if we're not giving land back, then we're not decolonized. Now, in Kamala Harris's, to Kamala Harris's, not credit, but in a tepid defense of her, you could argue, hey, well, she didn't say decolonization. Exactly, she didn't. She just said, we're going to acknowledge that Native people got screwed. We're going to acknowledge that Native people got their stuff taken, but we're not going to situate that in a bigger conversation about what justice looks like. What's the point of talking about colonization, acknowledging colonization, if you're not going to advocate for decolonization? Saying we need to spread a light on it doesn't help. She said, perpetrating violence, stealing land, and spreading diseases. Perpetrating violence, stealing land, and spreading disease. And she said we must do everything we can to address the impact of the past of Native communities today. So she's talking about doing something to help Native communities. But if you stole their land, then give it back. It's that simple. If the land was stolen, then it's not theirs. It's not the land of those who stole it. This is an easy one. This is an easy one. That's why Jazz LP said VP needs to solidify Indigenous Day by law and land, right? Otherwise, it's just symbolism. But point number two, the dirty irony of all of this is Kamala Harris might be criticizing Columbus Day, but she's not criticizing settler colonialism. I mean, irony alert. You're literally saying that settlers came to a land and used violence to steal the land of the indigenous people, and that we must do something to repair the damage that was done to those people who were impacted by the settler colonial land theft. At the very same time that you're watching and endorsing and funding Israel's settler colonial domination of the Palestinian people. How dare you? How dare we? How dare us? How dare we? How dare we Americans do this? How dare we as Americans sit there and talk about and feel good about ourselves, especially you liberals? Oh my God, we got the right consciousness, we got the right state of mind, we got good politics. We don't support, we criticize Columbus Day. Good for you. You criticize Columbus Day, but you celebrate Israeli Independence Day. How do you square that circle? How do you justify that contradiction? How do you reconcile those tensions? You can't. You cannot. You know why you cannot? Because they're irreconcilable. They're irreconcilable. You're either for decolonization or you're not. You're either for justice or you're not. You're either here to protect indigenous rights and indigenous land or you're not. And from the way y'all looking and talking and acting, it seems like you are on the not side of the equation. So I'm sorry, y'all. Kamala Harris deserves a slight applause for criticizing Columbus Day, a little more applause for calling it Indigenous Peoples Day. But other than that, if it isn't matched by action here in the States or a change of course in the Middle East, then this is all just lip service. And I'm tired of the lip service from politicians. I want action. It's that simple.